friends, and colleagues here to honor Mike today. It is especially heartwarming to see so many Moroskys together in one room here for such a joyous occasion. On the other hand, I believe that all of us are also thinking of those who are not with us today. I've chosen to make my introduction of Mike more personal in nature. I decided to read the letter that I wrote and sent in with the application for the award. I am nominating my nephew, Michael F. Morosky, MD, for the 2017 Native Son Daughter Award for several reasons. Not only is Mike the most dedicated obstetrician gynecologist who has at this point delivered over 6,700 babies since graduating from UConn Medical School in 1976, but he has distinguished himself among his peers and most importantly among his patients. Mike truly cares about people, the people he works with and the patients that he so patiently and wisely cares for. This caring attitude did not begin when Mike started medical school, but simply followed him there. One of the places that Mike cared most about was his hometown of Norwich. He attended elementary school at Samuel Huntington and then was a member of the first class at Kelly Junior High. He finished his Norwich education at NFA, where he was very active academically and socially. He was involved in many class projects and in fact was president of the senior class. To this day, Mike has maintained an active role with his class by being the class agent to the Alumni Association. During Mike's college years, he spent summers working as an ambulance attendant for American Ambulance Company. It was there that he had his first delivery. In fact, one of his local heroes, and mine too, Dr. Freddie, talked him through the delivery by telephone. It was then that Mike knew that not if, but when he attended medical school, obstetrics and gynecology would most likely be his specialty. I would like to think that as a labor and delivery room nurse for more than 15 years, that I may have played a small part in that choice as well. After graduating from UConn as an undergrad and then medical school, he fully intended to return to Norwich or a small town like it. Things have a way of working out differently, however, and he ended up at Harvard Hospital for the next 20 years. He never regretted a moment of it and feels that his time in the military gave him the experience to deal with the administrative duties that come with a large inner-city hospital. Mike then moved on to Johns Memorial Hospital in Stafford Springs, where he serves as chairman of the OB/GYN department. He still works 110 hours a week and is on call for the other 58. All of that being said, along with his caring of peers and patients, comes his caring of his family. None of us in our family would ever hesitate to pick up the phone and call him at any hour of the day or night with a problem or question. We always knew that by the time the conversation was over, Mike would have eased our fears and given us some sound advice. I ask you to consider my nephew for the 2017 Native Son Daughter Award for all of the above reasons. He followed his dream out of his hometown that he grew up and flourished in, but also the town that he's never forgotten and holds very dear to his heart. And lo and behold, it is now my distinct pleasure to introduce you to the 2017 Native Son, my nephew, Dr. Michael F. Morosky.
Most times when you get an award and you have to talk, you get nervous about people coming. And as my sister Carol would say, you are my peace. I don't have any trouble talking with my peace. I want you to imagine having a job where you get to see miracles happen every single day. And the job becomes your passion. And the more you do it, the more they pay you. And if you do it for over 40 years, they invite you back to your hometown and give you an award. Life doesn't get any better than that. I have looked at the list of my predecessors, 49 other people who have received this award. And I can tell you, those people, superstars. I'm not a superstar. But even though I'm not the most accomplished recipient of this award, and not the most deserving of this award, I will tell you, I will always be the most grateful recipient of this award. By coming here today, you've done 3 great things for me. Number 1, you give me another chance to come home. I loved growing up in Norwich. I had the best childhood. And coming home always makes me feel great because it reminds me of my childhood. The second thing is, you gave me a chance to come and see my family and my friends because I don't get much chance to see them. The third thing is, you've given me the chance to thank the people who made my life so great. In addition to delivering 6,782 babies. As of Monday, I've done over 5,000 surgical procedures. I've taken care of over 1,000 cancer patients. I've taken care of 500 infertility patients. I've taken care of countless women with routine gynecological problems. But for 33 years, I've also been a clinical assistant professor of medicine at the University of Connecticut School of Medicine, where I've helped to graduate over 1,000 students. And when I give lectures to my students, they always prefer that instead of me just giving them a dry lecture with facts and figures, that instead I tell them stories. Because it's the stories of the patients that I've taken care of that help them to understand the problems that we're studying at the time. I once went to a lecture being given by a very well-known author in this room. And one of the people in the audience raised her hand and she said, "Why do you think you're such a good writer?" And he said, "I think I'm a good writer because I've always been a good storyteller. And so today, instead of giving you a lecture, I want to tell you a story." Now, most of my family members are going to get really nervous because they know I can tell them all. But I promise it's not going to be that long. And the story starts with a woman, Catherine Mitchell Morosky, my mom. And she was born in Norwich, Connecticut, on May 24th, 1921. So today would have been Mom's 96th birthday. And if Mom were here, this would have been a much livelier party. Because Mom could throw a party. Because she learned how to throw a party from her mom, who could really throw a party. My dad was born in Norwich, February 11th, 1923. And they could not have come from more different worlds. My dad's parents were immigrants. My mom's parents were wealthy. My dad grew up on the west side. And for those of you who are less than 50 years old, the west side of Norwich during the Depression was not a good side of town. My mom grew up at 280 Broadway. 280 Broadway is the big White House across the street from Park Church. My dad's neighbors were immigrants. My mom's neighbors were the principal of the high school and the bishop. But my grandparents were the best. My mom's dad died 2 years after she was born, so I never knew him. But my dad's parents taught me how to take advantage of every opportunity and work really hard. My mom's mom taught me how to be generous and help take care of less fortunate. So those grandparents, those parents, you really can't go wrong. But my story doesn't end there. In addition to them, I had 2 best brothers and 2 best sisters in the world. My older brother, Paul, was senior class president at NFA, the best high school quarterback I've ever seen. And when he graduated from Yale, he became an electrical engineer, and he went to work for Electric Boat, and he is the only person I know who ever worked 40 years for the same company and then retired. He now is a world-class fly fisherman, so if you want any tips, he'll be glad to give it. His wife, Jean, was also in his class, and he and Jean always supported me all through school, especially in college, where they would send me what they called telephone money, so that I had money so I could phone home. I called it food. Jean went on to become, I think, the best English teacher, and it pays everything. And then I had my sister Carol, and Carol was closer to me in age than Paul was, and so Carol was really the one who looked out for me in public school. She taught me manners. The first time she saw me spit on the ground, she let me know that was never going to happen. Carol went on to become, I think, the best elementary school teacher that Norwich has ever seen. And in her retirement, she's written a book on parenting. And if you have children to raise, or if you have children who are raising children, you need to get them to read America's Answer to the Tiger Mother, How to Raise Happy, Successful Children, because it is free. My brother Frank and I were 11 months apart, and we were only 1 year apart in school, so we almost grew up like twins. When I was senior class president at NFA, Frank was upper class president. Frank went on to become the best physical therapist I've ever known. And he and I went to UConn together, where he met his wife Denise. And Denise has become the best artist I've ever known. She is now the chair of the art department at Connecticut College. And our baby sister, Tanya, was a researcher, and then she became the best mom in the world. And if you doubt that, you can just ask her 2 boys, they'll tell you it's true. So, having great grandparents, great parents, great brothers and sisters, you think, that's as good as it can get. But no, I also have the best aunts and uncles, the best cousins, now nieces and nephews, children and grandchildren in the world. And so they have made my life really, really easy. So with all of that behind me, I go off to Samuel Huntington School for kindergarten. Miss Bennett, Mrs. Sheridan, Mrs. Richardson, Mrs. Sullivan, Mrs. Kennedy, Mrs. Story, Mrs. Reardon got me through elementary school and taught me the value of education. And then I was on to Kelly. And at Kelly, I met a whole bunch of new friends and had a whole bunch of great teams. But when I walked into Mr. Krieger's class the first time, I knew this was my guy. The sign above his chalkboard said it all. The sign read, "A winner never quits, and a quitter never wins." Mr. Peter always called us by our last names, but he didn't call us just by our last name. He always called us Mr. Morosky, Mr. Schlossberg, Miss Belecki. And he always made us respect him, but he always respected us. What Mort did for me was Mort made math fun. And he taught me to respect everybody else. So I went from Kelly to NFA. And NFA made a whole bunch more friends and had a bunch more excellent teachers. Mr. Granovich taught me the value of history. Danny Sullivan taught me that poetry could be cool. He introduced me to my favorite poet, Robert Frost. And I had a number of other teachers who were wonderful. But my favorite teacher just happened to be my freshman football coach. And when he was my freshman football coach, he was not my favorite teacher. Because in freshman year, he told me, Mike, you are never going to become a football player. And I think it was that prediction that made me stick with football for 4 years, even though I was a terrible football player. But when he became my physics teacher, that's when he became my favorite teacher. Because George Vartanian always made physics relevant. When we couldn't understand a concept, he could always come up with an example in everyday life that explained what we were trying to do. And he, along with my best friend Pete Schlossberg, who was probably the smartest guy in the class, and my older brother Paul, who was always there to help me with homework, even if it was by phone. The three of them got me through physics. I can't say that I love physics today, but I can say that with their help, I got through physics and I found out that physics was relevant. While I was at NFA, I got my first job at Uncas Pharmacy. Harry and Selma Swansburg probably took pity on me because from the time I could walk, I was in there buying candy and gum. So they finally figured they made enough money from me during my entire lifetime that they could at least employ me for the last couple of years of my life. In my first year at the pharmacy, Selma taught me how to save. Save. I saved enough money working at the pharmacy that when I went to college, I could buy my own typewriter. That typewriter typed more papers for everybody else on my floor than it ever did for me, because I was the only guy on the floor who had his own typewriter. But Selma made sure I learned how to save. Harry tried to teach me how to invest. Unfortunately, I never had the courage for investing, so I've never invested much, but I have saved. And they also taught me you need to respect everybody, no matter what their race, religion, or their politics are. So Harry and Selma taught me. And I graduated from NFA and I went to UConn. And several of my classmates, in fact 49 of my classmates, went to UConn. A bunch of them are here today. And at UConn, I was able to go through my last 3 years with my brother Frank. Frank came to UConn. That really was great. Frank was my younger brother, but I always felt that Frank taught me how to deal with life. And my senior year, I was an RA, and his senior year, he was an RA. I went to UConn on an Air Force scholarship. In my senior year, I got accepted to flight school and med school at the same time. And because I was on an Air Force scholarship, they got to decide whether I went to flight school or med school, because they weren't going to let me do both. And it happened that Vietnam was winding down at the time, so they had more pilots than they needed, and they didn't have enough docs, so they told me I had to go to med school and I couldn't go to flight school. It was actually what I wanted to do, but I wasn't going to tell them that because I didn't want to embarrass them, because I thought they might change my orders. So I went to UConn Med School, and after my first year, I came home to Norwich, and I walked into Ron Aliano's office at Norwich Native Son, and I said, "Hi, I'm Mike Morosky. I'd like to work for you." And there were no EMTs or paramedics back then, so he simply said, "Have you taken advanced Red Cross training?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Do you have any other skills, experience?" And I said, "Well, I'm a medical student." He said, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I never had a medical student work with me. You're hired." Right after he said, "You're hired," the phone rang. And he answers the phone, and he looks at me and he says, "I got a call. And my other ambulance is out, so it's just me and you. Would you like to go on a call?" And I said, "Sure." So we go over to Greenville, and it turns out that morning, a family of 6 kids was in a station wagon. The oldest kid was 16 and was the driver. And the kids came around the corner in Greenville, and it had just rained that morning, so the road was slick. And as he comes around the corner, the car slides over to the other lane. And the kid looks and he sees a car coming right at him. And he has to make a decision, do I take the car head on, or I just pull off the road into the bushes? So he decides to pull off the road into the bushes, and the car that was about him slams on their brakes. They never collided. Unknown to the kid, the bushes were right at the top of a big embankment. So when he blows through the bushes, all of a sudden he's going down this hill, and he ends up in a field at the bottom of the hill, and he crashes into the bottom of the field. So when we got to the scene, we go right to the older folks who are driving the car. And both of them are complaining of sore necks from the whiplash. And so we put collars on them, and we start to take care of them. And the older gentleman says to me, "You really ought to go take care of the kids." And I looked at him and I said, "What kids?" He said, "The kids that went through the bushes." And so I said, "Oh." So I looked through the bushes, and down at the bottom of this hill is a station wagon with 6 kids plopping out of the station wagon. So I said to Ron, "We need to go down and see those kids." So we go down the hill, and we find out that the kid who was driving has broken his arm. And another kid has some bruises from hitting their head against the back seat because there were no seat belts back then. And as I'm trying to get one of the kids out, the kid says to me, "It's my little sister. She's in the back." So I climb over the seat, and here's the 6-year-old in the back seat. And I said, "Are you okay?" She said, "Yes, but I can't move my legs." So I go out and I said, "Ron, we got a spinal cord injury in the back seat." So he said, "Go up and get the board and get the case and come on down." So I carry the case board back down. We get the little girl onto the board. We tape her down, we put a collar on her neck, and we start carrying her up the hill. As we come through the bushes to the street, it turns out that somebody had told the parents that the kids were in an accident. And so just as we come through the bushes with this little girl on a board, her dad jumps out of his truck, and he sees us carrying his little girl, and he has a heart attack on the spot. We put the little girl down. We do CPR on the dad. We put him in the ambulance. We take him to the hospital. We come back. We get the little girl. We take her to the hospital. We come back. We get the boy with the broken arm and the kid with the bruise in the ambulance. We take him to the hospital. We come back. We take the old man and the old lady with the whiplash. And then we came back And we got the other 4 kids, and we take them to them. Turns out, the dad survived his heart attack. The little girl's spinal cord injury was just from swelling and temporary. She walked. And all the kids recovered. And on the way back to the office, after taking everybody to the hospital, I turned to Ron Aliano and I said, is it going to be like this? He says, Mike, this is the worst accident I've ever taken care of. He says, I hope you're not bad luck. So I said, okay, well, let's see how this goes. And a month later, lady calls, she's in labor, and I go down the street, and we deliver her baby with Fred Edie telling me how to do it over the phone. And years later, when Fred retired, he only asked 3 people to speak at his retirement, and I was one of the speakers. And so I got to tell everybody that he really became an obstetrician gynecologist because of Fred talking me through that first delivery. But every time I got a baby that's stuck and doesn't want to come out at 3 in the morning, I blame him for getting me into this. When my son decided to go to medical school, he said, Dad, I want to be a heart surgeon. And I said, that's really good. I wanted to be a psychiatrist. But I ended up being an obstetrician, and don't be surprised if you end up being an obstetrician too. And when he came home from school, the first day that he had delivered his first baby, his eyes were all glassy. He said, Dad, isn't delivering babies the best? And I said, for me, not for you. You're supposed to be my heart surgeon. And so now Michaela wants to go to medical school. And I keep telling her, it doesn't matter what you think you want to do. You might end up being an obstetrician. She said to me, well, it's not so bad, is it, Dad? No, not if it's what you really love to do. So, one other story I want to tell you about the ambulance. I had the great fortune of working at the ambulance service with another one of our classmates named Bobby Marshall. Bobby Marshall had been a medical tech in the Army, and he served 2 tours in Vietnam. Bobby Marshall saw things no one should ever see. But Bobby Marshall was working for the ambulance service same time I was. So one day, we had just taken a patient from the nursing home to the hospital, and we were taking it back to the nursing home to drop her off. And Ron calls us on the radio. He says, I got another job for you guys to do. I said, yeah, what's that? He said, I want you to go down to Dr. Barrett's office, get some papers, and then take the papers over to this address, and pick up a lady, and take her to the state mental hospital. He had never, ever told us to do this before. So I get on the radio and say, so Ron, these papers that we're picking up at Dr. Barrett's office, they wouldn't be commitment papers, would they? And he goes, yeah, they are. I said, and this patient that we're going to pick up, she doesn't know we're coming, does she? He goes, no, but if she gives you a hard time, just take her. Ron, if she gives us a hard time, I'm calling the police. I'm not putting a finger on anybody that doesn't want me to take her. And so he says, yeah, police, that's a good idea. So Bobby and I drive over, and we're going up this driveway, and all of a sudden this guy jumps out of the bushes, stops the ambulance, comes over to Bobby's window and says, she's up on the 2nd floor. I'm her husband. Just go take her. I said, sir, if she doesn't want to come, we're calling the police. And he said, yeah, that's a good idea. We can call the police. So we go in the house, and you go to the front door, and there's a stairway, and it goes up, there's a short landing, and just at the end of the landing is a door, and the door's closed. And Bobby Marshall, taller than me, is walking up the stairs ahead.
So we're both going up the stairs. He gets about 3 stairs from the top. The door flies open. This little old lady comes to the landing with a shotgun in her hand. She puts the shotgun in Bobby Marshall's face and she pulls a trigger. Gun doesn't go off. Bobby Marshall is over my head, down the stairs, out the front door. And I have no idea what is going on. I look up, she comes to the stairs, she sees me, she puts a gun in my face, pulls the other trigger. It doesn't go off. I go out to the front yard as fast as I can. And I'm standing there with Bobby Marshall, who at one time was a black guy, and he now is a white guy. The husband comes to the front door and sees us and says, "What is wrong with you guys?" He said, "You didn't tell us she had a gun." He said, "That old thing?" He said, "It doesn't work. It doesn't have any bullets." We said, "You didn't tell us she had a gun. You didn't tell us it doesn't have bullets. She shot both of us. We're lucky that we're alive." He says, "Oh, just go take her." And I said, "No, we're calling the police." So the police came and they did restrain her. She was not happy about that. And she swore at us and spit at us all the way to the state hospital. And that was another exciting day that I spent working for Ron Aliano at the Norwich Native Son Award. It was a great experience. It taught me that I really didn't want to be an emergency room physician. Although when I was in the Air Force, they made me be an emergency room physician, and working for the ambulance service really helped me. So I went back to Yukon, and my senior year got married and went into the Air Force. I will tell you one story about that. Because I had gone to medical school on an Air Force scholarship, I had to apply for an Air Force residency. And so I knew I was going to do OBGYN, and so I applied to the OBGYN residencies in the Air Force. And in OBGYN in the United States Air Force, there are 11 slots for interns nationwide, 11. And they had never taken a civilian because there were plenty of people on active duty who went to medical school and then wanted to come back and do their training in the military, and they always gave priority to people who had been in the Air Force before they went to medical school. So they had never taken a civilian into an OBGYN residency. So I told my fiancée just before we got married that don't worry, I'm never going to get into a residency program even though I have to apply, and I'll be doing my residency here in Connecticut, and then when I'm done we'll go into the military and I'll serve my time. And she said, great. So we got married, went on our honeymoon, came home for our honeymoon, and there's this big letter waiting for us when I got back, and I opened the letter and I go, oh my Lord, from every state. And my new wife says, what's that? And I said, it's a letter. She said, what kind of letter? I said, a letter of congratulations. She said, congratulations about what? She said, about residency. She goes, residency? I said, yeah. It's from the Air Force. It says, congratulations. You've been accepted for residency in obstetrics and gynecology at U.S. Air Force Medical Center, Keesler, Biloxi, Mississippi. And she said, but you told me that you wouldn't get accepted into the Air Force. And I said, yeah, I'm the first civilian they ever accepted. And she goes, I don't want to go to Mississippi. You just write them a letter, and you tell them you don't want to go. And that's when she realized what going to school on a military scholarship does for her. So I told her, no, I can't tell them. They own me. And I am government property, and I'll go anywhere they tell me to go. And so we're moving to Mississippi. And she said, but Mississippi has alligators and snakes. I said, yes, they do. And a residency program in obstetrics and gynecology, and we're going. She cried for 3 days. And then she moved to Mississippi. We had 2 great kids. Mississippi. And I did my training in Biloxi, and they promised to send me closer to home after my training. So they sent me to Cheyenne, Wyoming, where I was the chief of OBGYN in a 26-bed hospital, and I owned half of the beds, because half of the beds were for OBGYN, and the other half of the beds were for surgery and medicine and orthopedics and everything else, but I owned half the beds in the hospital. It was great. And the reason it was great, because in the military, as anybody who's ever been in the military type, it's all about we are bosses. If you got a good boss, military is easy. You got a bad boss, military is easy. So my boss, the hospital commander, was great. We got along great. And when it came time to get out of the military, we moved to Florida, where we thought everybody moves when they get out of the military. And we found out that Florida was A, too far away from home, and B, too hot. So my wife had grown up in Connecticut, so we moved home to Connecticut. And the first place I came to look for a job was Bacchus Hospital. And I was informed by the obstetricians at Bacchus Hospital, we got too many obstetricians here, so you can't come. And they didn't have enough obstetricians in Hartford, so went to work at Hartford, worked at Hartford Hospital for 20 years, got divorced, and then 2 years after my divorce, found that the best friend that I had was also the love of my life, and the best nurse I'd ever met, and the best pediatric nurse practitioner I'd ever met. And she turned out to be the best wife I could ever have. And so Judy and I got married while we were at Hartford. And then a friend of mine who happened to be the president at Johnson Memorial Hospital in Stafford Springs, Connecticut, he says to me, I just got a resignation letter from my last full-time obstetrician. I said, that's not good. He said, no, I know that's not good. He said, but, he said, you're going to leave Hartford and you're going to come out here and you're going to take over the OBGYN department. And I said, why would I do that? He said, well, you've been at Hartford for 20 years, that's long enough. He said, you got too many obstetricians in Hartford, you know that's true. He said, we don't have enough obstetricians out here. You're from out here. You always said you might want to try small community hospital medicine instead of large inner city teaching hospital medicine. And if you don't come, I'm going to have to close labor and delivery and lay off all the nurses. And I said, that's a lot of guilt to lay on somebody in one hour. He said, go home and tell your wife. She's a nurse. She'll understand. You got to come out here. So 13 years ago, I hired a young doc, and she and I went out to Johnson, and we started practicing. 2 years after we were there, she moved to Boston, and a malpractice crisis hit Eastern Connecticut, and the malpractice premiums for insurance went up so high that half of the obstetrician gynecologists in Eastern Connecticut left the state. And so did she. And I've never, ever been able to get anybody to come work in Eastern Connecticut, because unless you work as hard as I do, you can't make any money once you pay your malpractice. So that's how I became a solo practitioner. And that's one of the reasons why I've done so many deliveries, because I'm the only person doing deliveries. But my life has really been amazing because of all of the people who raised me and all of the people that I have become friends with, and all of the people who have taught me. And I have to say that I've gotten teaching awards just about every place I've been. I taught in Mississippi, I taught in Wyoming, I taught in Florida, I've taught in Connecticut. And people have always given me teaching awards, and I tell them the reason that I'm a pretty good teacher is because I had a couple of guys who taught me how to make learning fun and how to make learning relevant. And that's what Mr. Krieger and Mr. Barwigan taught me. And all of the people in Norwich helped to make me have the life that I've had, which in my money is the best life anybody's ever had. So today, I really want to thank you for honoring me, because this really is a very special honor. But I really want to thank you for giving me the chance to come back, see my hometown again, get together with my family and friends, and thank everybody who made my life the way that it is. One thing I want to add. When my family was being introduced, nobody introduced my son, Cam. Cameron is a junior at Norwich Native School in Windsor, and he is the catcher on the varsity baseball team. 2 years ago, he came to me and he said, "Dad, I'm the only one, but I don't want to go into healthcare." And I said, "Cam, that's okay. I just want you to seek your passion. So what do you want to be?" Cam said, "Dad, I'm going to be a catcher for the Boston Red Sox." And I said, "Yes, you are." And so Cam has his last game today. And although he had a concussion on Friday, so he can't play today, he's going to go to his last game today, because if his team wins today, they at least share the league championship. And this is the last time he's going to play with the seniors. And he really needs to be there today. And the school has a rule: if you miss school, you can't go to a game. So I wouldn't let Cam miss his last game with his team. And so he's not here today because he's at his baseball game, but he's a pretty important member of the family. So again, thank you everybody for coming. And thank you for giving me this honor, which I really don't think I deserve, but I will always